From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
We have seen Russia rip up the international rule book, trying to redraw the map of Europe, and creating, in just a few weeks, the most serious security crisis since the end of the Cold War.
As tension rises between Russia and the West, Ukraine announces plans to withdraw its forces from Crimea. We'll speak with Jack Matlock, who served as the last U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union. What he says about Russia may surprise you. Then Moral Mondays spread to Georgia, where 39 people were arrested at the state capitol this week. We'll speak with one of those arrested, Reverend Raphael Warnock, senior pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, the Church of Dr. Martin Luther King. Then, as death penalty drugs become scarce, the Assistant Oklahoma Attorney General jokes with a Texas colleague he might be able to help Texas get the drugs in exchange for 50-yard line tickets for a top college football game between the University of Oklahoma and the University of Texas. This is revealed in an email obtained by the Colorado Independent, which also exposed how Oklahoma injected leftover lethal drugs into a dead prisoner's body. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Ukrainian government is withdrawing its soldiers from Crimea as Russian forces continue to seize military bases. The announcement from Ukraine marks an acknowledgement it ceded control of Crimea in the aftermath of this week's referendum vote and subsequent Russian annexation. At least one Ukrainian soldier has been killed as Russian forces take over Ukrainian bases around Crimea. Earlier today, Russian troops reportedly released the commander of the Ukrainian Navy, who'd been seized in his own headquarters. At a United Nations hearing today in Geneva, a Ukrainian diplomat warned Russia is preparing a, quote, full-blown military intervention in Ukraine's east and south, a claim Russia denies. On Wednesday, President Obama ruled out U.S. military intervention while condemning Russia's annexation of Crimea.
We are not going to be getting into a military excursion in Ukraine. What we are going to do is mobilize all of our diplomatic resources to make sure that we've got a strong international coalition that sends a clear message, which is the Ukraine should decide their own destiny.
The Crimea standoff has sparked the worst East-West crisis since the end of the Cold War. Speaking during a visit to Europe, Vice President Joe Biden said the U.S. is considering sending ground troops to its Baltic allies for military exercises. On Wednesday, a U.S. Navy warship conducted a one-day military exercise in the Black Sea with the Bulgarian and Romanian navies. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the Russian government said it's considering changing its stance on Iran's nuclear talks in response to newly imposed U.S. sanctions. We'll have more on the crisis in Ukraine with the former U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union later in the broadcast. Israel has carried out a series of airstrikes on the Syrian military in the Golan Heights, reportedly killing one soldier and wounding 7 others. Israel called the attack retaliation for a bombing that wounded 4 of its soldiers in the area a day before. It was the first time Israel's acknowledged bombing Syria since the outbreak of the civil war there 3 years ago this month. Syria, meanwhile, has closed its border crossing with Lebanon after heavy clashes with rebel fighters driven from Homs province. A federal judge has ordered national election officials to assist Kansas and Arizona in imposing voter ID laws instead of rejecting their requests. The Election Assistance Commission had refused to add state-specific language sought by the states that would require proof of citizenship in order to vote. But on Wednesday, District Court Judge Eric Milgren ordered the EAC to grant Kansas and Arizona's requests. The ruling could pave the way for a 2-tiered voter registration system in which states add citizenship requirements for local races. The ruling would not apply to federal registration forms which fall under congressional jurisdiction. The NSA's top attorney has contradicted long-standing claims by the nation's leading technology companies that they were unaware of bulk government spying on their servers. Speaking before the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, NSA General Counsel Rajesh De said the companies have offered full cooperation to bulk Internet spying programs. De said the firms, including Apple, Google, and Facebook, may only have been unaware of details like the operation's codename PRISM. The companies have denied knowingly aiding government spying since leaks from Edward Snowden disclosed PRISM last year. The son-in-law of Osama bin Laden has unexpectedly testified at his terrorism trial. Suleiman Abu Ghaith took the stand Wednesday to deny having prior knowledge of 9/11 and other plots against the United States. During his testimony, Abu Ghaith described meeting with bin Laden inside a cave in Afghanistan just hours after the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. He's the most senior alleged al-Qaeda member to be tried in a U.S. civilian court in the years since 9/11. The auto giant Toyota has been fined a record $1.2 billion to resolve a criminal probe of safety defects in its cars. The penalty includes an admission that Toyota misled customers about problems that forced the car's acceleration even as drivers tried to slow down. Attorney General Eric Holder called the fine the largest of its kind.
The $1.2 billion payment represents the largest criminal penalty imposed on a car company in the history of the United States. This is appropriate, given the extent of the deception carried out by Toyota in this case. Put simply, Toyota's conduct was shameful. It showed a blatant disregard for systems and laws designed to look after the safety of consumers. By the company's own admissions, it protected its brand ahead of its own customers. This constitutes a clear and reprehensible abuse of the public trust.
Holder says the case could serve as a model for resolving other car safety cases, including the General Motors recall of millions of vehicles over faulty ignition switches. A mentally ill homeless veteran has died in a New York City prison cell that was apparently kept at a scorching temperature. Jerome Morda, a former Marine, had been arrested for trespassing after sleeping in a stairwell. Prison officials say they're investigating whether Morda died because of an overheated cell. The number of homeless people in New York City, meanwhile, has reached a record high. The Coalition for the Homeless reports more than 53,600 people slept in shelters each night in January, the highest amount ever recorded. There's also been a rise in people who are homeless and working. The report found 1 in 4 homeless families is headed by an adult who has a job. A new report reveals more information about deficiencies among staff at a U.S. nuclear missile base in North Dakota. Last March, airmen at Minot Air Force Base received a marginal rating on an inspection, the equivalent of a D. But the Associated Press reveals the rating was boosted by the performance of cooks and other support staff. On their own, the launch officers who hold the keys to nuclear missiles would have failed. There were also indications of cheating on exams. At least 92 officers at another base in Montana have been removed from launch duty in a prior cheating scandal. The Federal Reserve is again scaling back its monthly economic stimulus program. Under a policy called quantitative easing, the Fed has spent $85 billion a month buying up Treasury and mortgage bonds in a bid to trigger economic growth. On Wednesday, new Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen said the program will be reduced by an additional $10 billion a month. Yellen also said the winter season's extreme weather conditions have weakened the nation's economic recovery.
Unusually harsh weather in January and February has made assessing the underlying strength of the economy especially challenging. Broadly speaking, however, the spending and production data, while somewhat weaker than we had expected in January, are roughly in line with our expectations as of December, the last time committee participants submitted economic projections.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and